Qumran. Scholars have long been aware of the ruins standing atop a marl plateau on the northwestern coast of the Dead Sea. After the 1947 discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in caves not far from these ruins, archaeologists turned their attention to them. The first excavation was led by Father Roland de Vaux of the Dominican École Biblique. He viewed the ruins as a monastic center, identifying a scriptorium where the scrolls were written, a dining hall, a meeting room, a hoard of coins, and other aspects of a centrally organized community. These details fit the description of the Essene lifestyle in the writings of Philo, Pliny, and Josephus. Father de Vaux and others believed that the members of the community lived in caves or in tents whose wooden poles had been discovered, preserved in the region's dry climate. A large cemetery with very simple tombs is another indication of the austerity of the lifestyle of Qumran's inhabitants. Over the years, other scholars have tried their hand at alternative theories about Qumran. Some scholars believe that a direct route linked Jerusalem to Qumran and therefore suggest that it may have served as a rest stop for travelers crossing the Dead Sea to the hot springs of Kaleroi on the opposite shore, even positioning that it had port facilities at a time when the level of the Dead Sea was higher. Another theory notes that Qumran's layout is very similar to manor houses owned by an absentee landlord and worked by hired labor. If Qumran was such a complex, what was its main product? One of the site's heretofore unexplained installations is precisely one of those used for the production of perfume, probably from the balsam plant. It is possible that the Essenes, whom Josephus describes as excellent men wholly given over to agricultural labor, Antiquities 18:119, chose Qumran as a place where they could make their living while still pursuing the solitude and purity of desert life. Clay pots and oil lamps found at Qumran. A water reservoir at Qumran. Overview of the Qumran complex. A balsam factory. Some scholars believe that this unusual structure at Qumran may have been part of a furnace that heated water to process the balsam plant. The most famous pharmaceutical and cosmetic of the ancient Holy Land was balsam, mentioned in use already in Old Testament times, Genesis 37:25, Jeremiah 8:22, 51:8. Josephus calls it an ointment of all the most precious, Antiquities 14:4-1, and notes that it was produced near Jericho. Production of this expensive plant into medicine and cosmetics was kept such a secret that the plant, which has been identified with Commiphora opobalsamum of ancient records, has become extinct. Josephus reports that the balsam sap exuded like tears from its branches when they were cut with sharp stones. Wars of the Jews 166. Once in the factory, two forms of fragrance were manufactured. The sap was made directly into an unguent, opus balsamum, the most expensive form of the product. The other product was made when the branches of the plant were cooked in water in big baths. The resulting juices were mixed with olive oil. This product was called aromatic oil. In such a factory, there would be furnaces and big vats of water. This jar, with the word balsam written on it in Hebrew letters, was discovered at Masada and no doubt contained this precious commodity. At work in the balsam factory. The Dead Sea Scrolls. Fragment of a daily prayer. The Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1947 by a Bedouin goat herder in a cave above mysterious ruins at Qumran on the northwest shore of the lowest and saltiest body of water on earth that gave them their name. Since that day, the scrolls have mesmerized scholars and lay people alike. The reason is simple. They contain texts of the oldest Hebrew Bible ever discovered, predating by nearly 1,000 years the next known oldest Hebrew biblical manuscripts. The discovery of the first 7 scrolls was followed over the next decade by the discovery of another 200 scrolls and thousands of additional fragments. While the Isaiah scroll was the only book discovered in its entirety, the scrolls comprise segments of every book of the Bible except Esther. Most of this scriptural treasure was discovered accidentally, years after the initial find, in a cave not far from where archaeologists were busy exploring the ancient ruins of Qumran. With the notable exception of one scroll written on copper and containing an arcane description of hidden treasure, the scrolls were written mainly on parchment. A few were inscribed on papyrus, with carbon-based ink. Some scrolls were discovered wrapped in linen and placed in tall cylindrical jars. Others seem to have been placed hastily in the caverns, as if to hide them from prying eyes. While scholarly debate refuses to rest on anything concerning the Dead Sea Scrolls, it now appears to some that the scrolls were written by different hands and perhaps in different areas of the country before being deposited in the caves. Interior of a Qumran cave. Part of the Habakkuk commentary. One of the clay jars in which the Qumran scrolls were discovered. What is in the Dead Sea Scrolls? About 40% of the contents is similar to the Masoretic text. Masoretic means traditional and is the name for the next oldest Hebrew text contained in the Aleppo Codex and dating from the 10th century CE. Some of the scrolls are similar to the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Bible from Hebrew written in the 2nd century BCE, while yet other scrolls are similar to the ancient version of the Bible used by the Samaritans. Some scrolls are completely unique, such as certain previously unknown Psalms and an Aramaic book of Job and Leviticus. Who wrote the scrolls? Scroll fragment from Leviticus 26, 2-16. In addition to Bible scrolls, other scrolls discovered at Qumran are known as the sectarian writings. These contain the beliefs of the people who call themselves Hayahad, the covenant. The sectarian writings indicate that its members first left Jerusalem under the leadership of one they called Teacher of Righteousness, and during the term of office of an evil priest, recognized variously as one of the many high priests that rose and fell from power, or perhaps one of the Hasmonean kings. The Yahad accused the high priests of abuses of power and felt that worship in the temple was not carried out in the requisite state of purity. The group responded to these ills by leaving the cities to start a new, purer way of life in the desert. The group's writings show that belief in the end of days was an important part of their faith. A time would come, they foretold, when the wicked would be destroyed during a great battle between the forces of good and evil, known to them as the children of light and the children of darkness. Israel would then be liberated from the yoke of foreign domination. The survivors of the battle, the members of the sect, led by a righteous high priest, would bring a great light to the world and light up the faces of many. From the portion of the community rule scroll known as Sirach Habrakat. The group lived a communal life, eating, studying, and praying together. They took all their decisions together, counseled by their elders. Great emphasis was placed on ritual purity, achieved by frequent immersion in a ritual bath. As a means of separating themselves from other Jews, they did not sacrifice in the temple, and they maintained a solar calendar instead of the lunar one used by mainstream Judaism. Most scholars agree that John the Baptist may have spent time studying and living with the people of Qumran, and that his emphasis on water immersion may have had its origins and exposure to the teachings of the sect. Scholars also point to Essene terminology appearing in the New Testament, such as the words children of light, Luke 16:8, John 12:36, Ephesians 5:8, 1 Thessalonians 5:5, as hints of the teachings of the sect which filtered into early Christianity. Fragment of a Pentateuch scroll from the Qumran written in Paleo-Hebraic script. An inkpot discovered at Qumran. Remains of the carbon-based ink were discovered within. Part of an appendix to the Manual of Discipline, Rule Book of the Qumran community. Sandal nails from Qumran. The copper scrolls before opening. They despise riches. In vain would one search for one with a greater fortune than another. All of them loving frugality and hating luxury as a plague for body and soul. Philo Apologia Pro Judaeus 4. All are to dine together, the community rule. Numerous clay bowls and plates were discovered in the Qumran pantry. Whatever they receive as salary is not kept to themselves but is deposited before them all. Wars of the Jews 2:8-3. A hoard of coins discovered at Qumran. A fragment of the famed copper scroll. And you shall cleanse all by our holy laws, and then he shall enter the water. He will recite and say, Blessed are you, God of Israel, according to your command. The cleansing of all things is defined from the baptismal liturgy of the sect. The ritual immersion bath at Qumran. The port of Caesarea. And when he had landed in Caesarea and gone up and greeted the church, he went down to Antioch. Acts 18:22. Herod's port in Caesarea was the largest in the eastern Mediterranean and one of the busiest, exporting all the riches of the east to Rome, only a 10-day journey away. The port consisted of an outer basin protected by 2 artificial sea walls. The southern breakwater was 1,800 feet long and over 160 feet wide. At the tip of the southern breakwater was a huge lighthouse tower, which Herod named for Drusus, Augustus' son-in-law who had died young. It was from this port that Paul the Apostle set sail for Rome, Acts 27:1. The sea walls were constructed out of huge blocks, each one some 12 feet high by 52 feet long and 21 feet wide, created by pouring concrete into wooden forms. The concrete utilized an important new building material, volcanic ash instead of sand. The concrete was poured and hardened underwater, the first use of hydraulic concrete anywhere in the world. A sluice system kept the port free of silt. The southern breakwater of Harrod's Port lies beneath these modern and Crusader structures. Opposite page. A lighthouse is presumed to be one of the towers marking the entrance to the protected inner port of Caesarea.